Welcome to Our Canada, Our Future. I'm Aaron Woodrick. On today's show, we're going to be talking about an issue that's top of mind for a lot of Canadians, rising prices and inflation. As everyone knows, the price of everything from food to gasoline to housing has been going through the roof, and a lot of Canadians are struggling just to make ends meet. And to talk about this very important issue, I'm very pleased to be welcoming Philip Cross, Senior Fellow at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute, who's written a great deal about this topic. Philip, thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure, Aaron. Thanks for having me on.
Now, Philip, as I said, you've written a great deal about this, but I wanted to sort of start at the beginning. Of course, a lot of Canadians are experiencing these increases in prices. They're frustrated by them. Some of them are having a very hard time making ends meet. But what is the fundamental cause here? This is an issue that is plaguing not just Canada, but countries around the world. What, in your view, is the cause of all this rapid inflation?
Well, fundamentally, inflation is an imbalance between supply and demand. During the pandemic, governments around the world stoked demand through excessive monetary and fiscal stimulus. But at the same time, and we've just come to understand this more coming out of the pandemic, the supply side of the economy clearly was damaged during the pandemic as well. This is most clear, it's becoming obvious in the labor markets. But other things such as global supply chains with China, more recently, the supply of energy has been disrupted because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. There's any number of factors that have raised demand beyond what the economy or the world economy is capable of supplying these days.
Is it fair to say that in this case, because of course inflation has existed at various times, but the amount of the inflation, the speed at which we're seeing it increase right now, is it a function of the unique circumstances of the pandemic? That is to say, you had, as you said, governments pouring out a lot of money into the economy, so you're spiking demand on that side, and then supply challenges. So rather than just demand rising and supply even staying the same, supply has actually been impacted in a negative way. So is it fair to say those two things combined are what's leading to particularly high inflation right now?
Well, that's a good way of putting it. But we've seen this problem has been building even since before the pandemic. I mean, we've seen for 10 years now, we've been relying on especially easy money monetary policy to stoke growth. And over that same period, we've been ignoring the supply side. And organizations such as the Bank for International Settlements, what's often called the central bank to central banks, they've been warning governments to pay more attention to stimulating the supply side. The problem we have now is that in the very short term, inflation has blown through the roof. We're looking at 8% plus. And in the supply side, supply side takes a long time to correct. So you can't really fix it. So the only thing left to do in the short term is to tamp down demand. And given the fiscal deficits that we're running, the only game in town at this point is raising interest rates. And that's why the ball is very much in the Bank of Canada's court to rein in inflation in the short term.
And let's talk about the Bank of Canada a little bit. I'm not sure a lot of viewers might fully appreciate the role of the central bank. What is the role of the central bank when it comes to managing inflation?
Well, the central bank has a mandate to keep inflation at 2%. They have a negotiated mandate with the federal government. The federal government and other levels of government can do things to help inflation in the longer term. They could help improve the potential of the economy by, for example, freeing up interprovincial trade. People have been calling for that for a long time. We could have done things to improve housing supply for over a decade now. So governments, are not blameless in this, but in the very short term, the Bank of Canada alone has one mandate, and that's to fix inflation. No other organization in the federal government or in Canada has only one mandate, and that is to control prices, and that's the Bank of Canada. So that's why the Bank of Canada has to take the lead on this.
And correct me if I'm wrong, in the way they control inflation is by changes to the interest rate?
That's the primary one. I mean, there's other things. Governments could lower their deficits. That would certainly help. The Bank of Canada could have urged governments to be more creative in boosting potential. But as I say, that's going to take years before it has any impact. So in the very short term, given the failure of governments to act, the only thing that can be done in the very short term to rein in prices is to raise interest rates. And we've already seen some positive impact from this. Housing prices are clearly off the boil in this country. Energy prices have come down, at least in the short term, as demand has started to slow down.
Right.
So we're already seeing some. I think very soon we might be past peak inflation in this country.